So in the last lesson, we were discussing about the routing tables, and we've seen how we can create a routing tables and attach the routing tables to the subnets and route the traffic to the firewall thing. In this lesson, we'll try to understand Azure Point2Site VPN. So we call Point2Site VPN. So let's take, we have an Azure network. So Azure virtual network, I would say coordination with 172.16.0.0 slash coordination 16 in some region, whatever it could be within the one subscription or whatever it might be. So within this virtual network, we have multiple subnets. So we'll take subnet 1, subnet 2, subnet 1, subnet 2, and I'm taking a subnet 3. So let's say subnet 1 S1 172.16.0.0/24. And we have S2 subnet 2, which is 1.0. And S3, which is 2.0, like this one. So we have S1, S2, S3, subnets 1, subnet 2, subnet 3. So now we have created virtual machines. Now, like we have a VM1 or VM. So when we create a virtual machine, this virtual machine having virtual machines. Having this kind of machines. Now, when we don't have a public IP addresses assigned to these virtual machines, now we cannot access the applications which are assigned, or the applications which are deployed inside these virtual machines cannot be accessible from internet. Now let's say this is an internet. Now when we want to access these virtual machines outside of the corporate network, then we really need public IP addresses. But there could be a lot of applications which are not required to be accessible from outside. That means these virtual machines need not to be, the applications need not to be accessible from outside. So if I allow from outside, there is a security threat. But a lot of internal applications which will reside. Now, a lot of administrators need to manage these resources which are sitting in the subnets. Now we cannot have a public IP addresses for each and every resource deployed in the Azure. Like you have a SQL Server applications, you have a backend applications. We really don't want to have a public access because there is a lot of security threat. Our requirement here is in the user. Basically, the user could be an administrator or someone who's basically outside of the Azure network. You want to interact with these machines, but these machines does not have public IP address. They don't have a public IP. So even though we have a firewall, even though there is a firewall, but there is no DNAT rules available in the firewall. Now, what options we have now? Now, how can we enable the user to access the private resources or the internal resources which are sitting in the Azure virtual network. Azure virtual network. That's where we call it as an Azure Point2Site. So we call it as an Azure Point2Site, which is in a short form, it is called as a P2S VPN, virtual private network. Now Azure provides a feature to have a Point2Site VPN. So what is this Point2Site VPN? So Point2Site VPN is basically a VPN service available in Azure Virtual Network. Enables the users from outside of Azure network can authenticate, establish a secure communication to the virtual network. So what this does is, so this feature provides an option wherein the user who is sitting outside of the Azure virtual network can establish a connection with the virtual network and enables a secure communication to the virtual network. So this enables the users to access the private or internal resources over the internet. So we try to establish a secure network over the internet. So this provides an option. So now the user who is there in the outside of the virtual network or outside of the Azure network now can establish a Point2Site VPN and can basically, once the VPN has been established, the connection has been established, then the user can access it and basically provides different ways of authentication, like certificate-based authentication, like an Entra ID authentication, okay, like device authentication. So the users can use different forms of mechanism to authenticate the Point2Site VPN device. So what happens with this one? The users who are sitting in internet connected to the internet who are outside of the corporate network, who are being part of internet. Let's say user one, user two, like user three. Now they need to access the internal resources which are available here now. So the Azure is providing a Point2Site. Now what is required in order to establish a Point2Site? So we need something called as Azure Virtual Network Gateway. Azure Virtual Network Gateway. In a short form, it is called as a VNG. It's called as a VNG. So what is this VNG is in? So Azure Virtual Network is basically a VPN device on the Azure provides a point-to-site and site-to-site VPN services. VPN services. So this is a VPN device, which is called as virtual device. We can call this a virtual device on the Azure. And we'll have two interfaces. So one interface will connect to the internet with public IP, and another interface with a private IP address connected to VNet. So what happens with this case is so VNG is one kind of a device. We call it as a VPN device in Azure. So VNG. Now the VNG will have two interfaces. So one interface will connect to the internet with a public IP address, where this subnet is dedicated only for virtual network gateways or NAT gateways. So let's say if I'm taking a gateway subnet, which is 172.16.254.4/24, whatever it can be, a lesser also. But here I'm just trying to create a lesser size. Now one interface of the virtual network gateway will get connected to the gateway subnet. And this gateway subnet, the virtual network gateway, will have a private IP address. Private IP address. Private IP address. So this interface of the VNG will have a private IP address, so which will get from a gateway subnet and public IP address, which we provided during the deployment of the VNG. So users can have and provides basically a VPN client, where the users can use VPN client to authenticate, to interact, or basically to establish a connection with VNG and authenticate. Now this VNG can talk to the Entra ID if we enable the certificate-based Entra ID authentication. And the users can use a VPN client on the devices, a VPN client. So which they can use the VPN client to dial into the VNG and establish a connection. The VNG will allocate an IP address from the scope defined. Now VNG will have on the VNG we define an IP address scope, that what IP address has to be provided to the users. So when the users authenticate to a virtual network gateway, as soon as they get connection established, the VNG will allocate a private IP address and will automatically establish a routing information between the user network and the virtual network. So it will automatically establish the route. So it will forward the traffics from the IP network which is being provided in the virtual network gateway to the virtual network, and from virtual network to the VPN network, and from the VPN network to the Azure virtual network. So during the configuration of that, we need to define what IP addresses we need to provide for the users when they authenticate and connect to this one. And it will automatically, so VNG will automatically update a routing information in the backend router. Okay, a router. So as we discussed earlier, there will be one kind of an internal router inside the virtual network where all these subnets connect to this virtual router. All these subnets connect to the virtual router. So by default, this router routes the traffic between all these subnets. So now when we have a VNG deployed, now let's take an IP address network called as 192.168.25.0/24 is the IP network which is being given to the VPN clients. Now the VNG will automatically updates the routing information to this router saying that, hey, in order to reach the 25.0 network, okay, you need to forward the packets to B. Now the internal router will update the information that in order to reach 25. Network, the gateway will be this IP address. For the rest, maybe if we have configured the firewall and pointing the route to the firewall, then the traffic might be going to the firewall based on the router. Now what happens now? So when a user establishes a connection to the VNG, the user system will get a route information saying that in order to reach 172.16.0.0, this is the gateway IP address which is being provided. Now that way what happens is the users can establish a communication with the private IP address of the VMs over the internet. So this VNG plays a crucial role in establishing a point-to-site VPN. Let's see that how we can basically do that. First, let's create a virtual network. If it already exists, it's fine. Then we need to create a subnet, a gateway subnet. Create a VNet, then create a gateway subnet. I'm going to the virtual networks. I'm creating a virtual network. I'm giving AL-VNet. Next. I'm taking 172.16.0.0. I'm creating a subnets S2. Let me change this one as S1. Now review and create the VNet. If already VNet is existing, it's fine. So we can go to the VNet and we can basically, so I'm going to the VNet. I see a subnets. S1, S2. Now you see a gateway subnet. Let's create a gateway subnet. So I'm giving it 254.0. So automatically take the name as a gateway subnet. We cannot change the name. So create a gateway subnet. Then basically then create an Azure VPN application for authentication purpose. So let me go to the certificate-based authentication. Yeah. So we can go to this URL. And let me use another account. So this will create one app and an Entra ID. So go to the Microsoft Entra ID. So you can check this URL to launch the app. Then we need to go to the Entra ID and enterprise applications. So go to the manage. We would see enterprise applications. Now we can see that it is deployed a VPN client, Azure VPN client. And go to the VPN client. Now we would see the name of the VPN application ID. Copy this application ID. Let me take the tenant ID. So now we can go to the manage wiki user search groups. Now, which users can authenticate to this VPN? Now, let me go to the groups. So I'm creating a new group in Azure AD. So I'm giving it acute VPN-users. Created. Now let's go to the enterprise applications. I'm going to the Azure VPN application. Then you can assign permissions. I'm saying users. As this is a restriction on the plan which is selected, so I don't have access to the group, but you can create a group only for the users. So I'm allowing Venkat and Rohit user. Who can basically authenticate, okay, to the VPN. So you need to assign a group or a users overall can basically interact with this one. Let me go to the Azure AD. Let me take the tenant ID. This is my tenant ID. Okay. So what we did here is now we went to the enterprise application. Then basically we added users or a group to basically authorize the VPN connection. Now, nothing but which users can basically use the VPN services. Now, only the users who are being added into the application, then we can do that basically. So you will find Azure a VPN application. Now let's go to the virtual network. So I'll type for virtual network gateways. So I'm creating a new virtual network gateway. So under which subscription? Name of this one, I'm saying AL-VNG, and which location you want to deploy. Now here we can see gateway type. It's for VPN purpose or express route purpose. Now we are using it for VPN purpose. Which virtual network? Now automatically it is taking the gateway subnet. So public IP address as the VNG needs a AL VPN VNG public IP. So I don't need an active mode. So it can also provide some active mode. It can basically configure two VNGs which can put on this one. Review and create. Yeah. So I will not kept it ready. This will take roughly around half an hour time. So to save that with VNG is available. Now let's go to the VNG. So now the sixth step, what we did is a deploy virtual network gateway to the virtual network. Now seventh one is basically configure VNG. So this would roughly take around 30 minutes of time to deploy the VNG. Now we already have a VNG deployed. So go to the settings, click on point to site configurations, configure now. Now the address pool is the IP address pool which will be used to assign IP address to the users upon connection or authentication. So it should not come with the IP address of the virtual network. So we need to ensure that this IP series will not get conflict with any other URL. I'm giving 26.0/24. Tunnel type OpenVPN. Authentication. So how are you going to authenticate? I'm going to use Azure Active. The tenant, audience, and issuer. Basically, we can see called as a tenant ID. So we need to provide this in this format. Let me copy this. The tenant ID. I'm replacing this with the tenant ID. Provide a tenant ID. Then you have an audience. The audience, when you go here, you would see the is the audience. Then issue provide the issuer details. As we can see, it's a tenant ID. Let me copy this from somewhere. STS. Now I'm just giving it here. Let's take the tenant ID and replace this with the tenant ID. Copy this one. Provide at the issuer. So at the end, the slash is also important. So this specifies that whenever the user is connecting, we are saying that use the Azure AD authentication. So the app which is being deployed is an Azure VPN. So use that VPN for authentication purposes. Save it. So which called as a point to site configuration, which we need to do it. Now, while this is going on, now you can download Azure VPN client from Microsoft Store. So I'm going to the store, Microsoft Store. Search for Azure VPN. So you'll see Azure VPN client. Just click on that one. Install it. So you can download the VPN client from Microsoft Store or from the URLs. Installed. Now you can find once it has been installed, the configurations got saved. Go to the VNG. Go to point design configuration. Now you see download VPN client. There is a configuration information. Before that, let me go to the Azure VPN client. We can see Azure VPN client. VPN connections. Now, as of now, there are no VPN. So click on plus, add or import. You can download this VPN client. Configuration file. Yeah. So now we have the download. Just extract this one. Now we'll find some configuration information files, which we can use it now. Simply after extracting it, go to the VPN client, click on plus, say import. Go to the downloads folder from where we did it, Azure VPN, select the configuration file. Now it automatically gets the connection name, the VPN server name, then certificate and server secret, whatever the configurations what we did in the VPN, save it. Now this will be saved. Next time when you open the VPN client, you see that this is available. Now let's go to the virtual network and deploy certain virtual machines before we test it. Yeah, I'm selecting acute VNet and I'm selecting subnet 1. I'm selecting no public IP. So we don't need any public IP. Review and create. Import the configuration into VPN client. Yeah. Now we have the VM deployed in Azure Virtual Network. Let's take the private IP. We can see private IP. I'll try to connect to the private IP. Still, we have not established a VPN client, VPN. Now I cannot reach this machine because It is in Azure Virtual Network. It is in Azure Virtual Network. One of the VM which is there in Azure Virtual Network. It doesn't have any public IP. Now I cannot reach it. So now what I'm trying to do is then I'm going to establish a VPN connection. VPN client, just say connect. Let me do this one. Let me authenticate. For the first time, it may take some time. We can see the status logs, the down. Now it's got connected. So when we go to the command prompt ipconfig, we see 26.2 is the IP address which it got for VPN adapter. Now let me connect to the virtual machine IP. Now we can see that we are able to access it. So now we are securely, the user we got basically dialed into the VPN, we authenticated successfully. Then the virtual network gateway gave an IP address. Then the routing has been established now over the secure VPN tunnel. So we are able to access the virtual machine using a private IP address, or any resources which are there in this virtual network can be accessible as long as there are no network security groups or anything blocking it. Okay. So this way, we can use Azure VPN point-to-site configurations using Entra authentication. Yeah, in the next lesson, we'll try to understand what options we have available for to establish a connection between on-prem to the Azure virtual network.